this session, we want to, talk about the hard questions around enterprise development and why people are informal when capital fails to meet the capable people that, we can support to scale. So across the Southeast, millions of enterprises operate daily, trading, producing, employing, and reinvesting, yet formal financing is very hard to reach them. So for context, I've already introduced myself, and the role I'm going to play today is not to present per se, but to help guide practical system-driven conversations, and let's reflect on how we can change this thing for the betterment of the Southeast. So to frame this conversation properly, we need to hear from someone who has worked at scale, someone who understands credit, not as theory, but as a system that must work for the real people and the real markets. Our lead speaker today is Engineer Uzoma Wagba. He's the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Consumer Credit Corporation, also known as Credit Corp. Under his leadership, more than 200,000 Nigerians, including civil servants and young professionals, through the Youth Cred program, have accessed consumer credit to the tune of over 30 billion. I think that's quite commendable. Before Credit Corp, he served as the Chief Executive Officer of the Government Enterprise and Empowerment Program, and that's exactly when myself and Engineer Uzoma first met under the G program. We did programs for the Survival Fund initiative under Buhari. The G program has been known to be one of the largest microfunding initiative globally, and he also supported in the NG Cares funding program for SMEs. So to not take too much time, we want to invite to the table to present to us Engineer Uzoma Wagba. Can we give him a round of applause, please? Can we give him a round of applause? Interview. Just wait. Got it. Fly up.
All right, good afternoon. I know that I'm probably what is standing between you and your lunch. So we will try to keep this as briefly as possible. We can't talk about enterprise in Nigeria without talking about the Southeast. If you don't talk about the Southeast when it comes to enterprise, then you have really just not started that conversation. And as Arinze had mentioned, I met Arinze on a journey of essentially chasing enterprises across the country and trying to fund them. So I used to work on a government enterprise and empowerment program that took me to every state in this country, many of them multiple times, except 3 states. Of course, I've been to all the states in the Southeast. And what I am going to share today briefly is just a summary of lessons that we've learned. Because the question that I was asked to talk about was why most Southeast businesses stay small and informal. And when this is asked, for those, many of you here are into business, or especially those who have big businesses, there's this thing they say in business about if you build it, they will come. That if you build a big hospital, or you build a big supermarket, or a big boutique, that people will come. And most people who operate on that notion end up learning a very hard lesson. That the fact that you build something big does not mean that people will come. That people will come when you are creating value for them. So I'm going to start off my talk by actually turning the matter on its head I'm making my first assertion this evening that formalization is not the primary problem of Southeast businesses. And what do I mean by this topic of formalization is, let the keke rider or the tailor or the shop or storekeeper, let them have a CAC certificate, let them have audited accounts or an accountant, let them have a couple of physical locations or at least one, let them have bank accounts that are tracked, let the entrepreneur separate their business from their personal expense, let them be an enterprise that is, separate from the individual. And that when they are formalized, then they will be more attractive for capital. And in the time that I have spent studying a lot of businesses, and when I say businesses, I am talking hundreds of thousands of them and in career, having funded, getting close to 4 million of them at different sizes. We've seen that in the Southeast in particular, the businesses are not formal, yes, majority, but it doesn't mean that they are disorganized. And that why they don't formalize is because formalization costs them so much, and the biggest cost is not even money. That the things you force them to do, they are not ready for that level of responsibility. That does not translate to higher customers or higher earnings. So the real issue is the absence of things that enable the businesses to get to scale. Because once a business gets big enough, you will not need to force it to go and register or get a bank account. It will go and do that automatically or on its own. And I'll use a typical example when we say that Southeast enterprises already produce value. I spent the first maybe 10 years of my life, as far as I can remember, in the Southeast. I don't remember being told of leaving the Southeast in the first 10 years before I left Aba, where I grew up and I was born, to go to King's College. And in those 10 years, I never knew that you could go to a store and point at a shirt and buy it. Or you could go to a shop and see shoes and buy it. Like, I didn't grow up knowing that that was a thing that you did, because I lived 20 minutes from Ariaria Market, and I mean 20-minute walk. So every time we needed to buy clothes, we walked to Ariaria Market and they took our measurement and made the clothes. Anytime we needed to buy shoes, my parents or myself would take a broomstick and take the length of my foot and cut the broomstick and then go to the market, and the shoe was made for you. So the idea of boutiques pointing to buy things was completely foreign to me as a child, until I left to Lagos. And then I saw all these boutiques and I was thinking, why did they not ask the people before they made the clothes for them? So, but now I remember some of those businesses, Agro and Sons, uncle's businesses. I realized that we're just paying them the money in cash. And they were doing hundreds and hundreds of clothes and shoes daily. And you could say that they were not formal, but they were extremely organized. In fact, they had cooperative, they had credit within each other. They were super organized. So, and they were to the point where they were sending clothes and shoes to Cameroon, sending clothes and shoes to other neighboring states here. Some, and all of these are businesses that will come today. If you looked at them, we will say they are informal. They are not formalized. But when Agro and Sons started growing to the point where they then needed to hire 20 more people, when they were now exporting, and when you require certain things from them to be able to meet them at that level of scale, then they had to formalize. So Southeastern businesses are informal, but they are not disorganized. So if you start the problem from anybody who is informal is disadvantaged, that is the wrong thing to do. What we should ask is, how do we get them to the point where they are big enough that formalization becomes inevitable? Let me give you a bit of stats. So that pyramid you see there is a representation of MSMEs in Nigeria, and that one in particular is not different from how it is on the Southeast, maybe just a little bit less formalization. And majority, when I say majority, I mean 99% of MSMEs are informal. Informal just means they don't have all the registrations and bells and whistles and accounting and all of that allows them to go to a bank, which is why banks typically do not fund businesses, micro, small, and medium businesses. So, and the reason is that growth is risky for them. What that means is, if you say that keke, somebody talked about the keke that brought her to this place today. You say he should go and get a CAC certificate and get a bank account, get management accounts that they can use to get loans so that they can get the next keke and then hire a third person. But then that also comes with taxation. That also comes with reporting requirements. That also comes with some of the things that have been set by law and by statute that businesses have to do. So it becomes less prudent for them to do that. But until they get to scale, then it becomes prudent for them to do that. So I make as we think of Vision 2050, I am making a few propositions here, which is that we should first focus on helping our businesses to get to scale. And I'll talk about the levers that can be used to achieve that. So let's not obsess too much over formalization, because in the way they're operating today, they are creating value, they are effective, they are producing things, and they are selling, and sometimes selling across borders. But when you enable as many of them as possible in the Southeast as an economic bloc, and I'll give you an example, interstate trading, then we'll allow them to get to scale. Now, what are the things that are missing? I think I'll just, for the sake of time, go through the three things that need to be done. First, credit. And everybody says credit, loans, credit. But formalization means that it is a bank. You have to give credit to a business, a limited liability company. Uzoma Nigeria Limited. If 98% of the businesses are trading as Uzoma Wagba, not Uzoma Nigeria Limited, then it means that credit, you have to meet them where they are with the credit. And I'll tell you a simple story about the current work that I do. So, April 2024, the president of the country announced the creation of Consumer Credit Corporation, Credit Corp, and appointed me as the managing director. Now, and his idea was, we need to allow people to get credit, consumer credit for themselves, to buy vehicles for themselves, to get furniture for themselves. Some of you are used to America and some of these other countries. So consumer credit, credit cards, to buy things for yourself to improve the quality of your life. Get a laptop, get a cell phone, renovate your house, get a television. So personal lifestyle credit. And so we go on this journey working closely with the CBN, trying to a number of things. First, raising capital to support the financial institutions with more to make credit cheaper for people. Remember, it's consumer credit to individuals for their personal life and households. And then on the other side, fixing the credit score system in Nigeria, which we'll talk a bit more about later. So we go on this journey, and then 200,000 people over the past 18 months or so have accessed consumer credit from credit enabled by Credit Corp. Now we ask them, what are you using this credit for? More than half of them that are supposed to be getting credit for personal life and their households are using it for business, because they cannot get credit as a limited liability company. So the point I'm making here is, meet entrepreneurs where they are. And if you want to give them credit, if majority of our entrepreneurs are informal, just accept them where they are and find a way to fund entrepreneurs as individuals. A creative who has a camera running around the place trying to make movies. We shouldn't start by forcing them to go and create 3 companies and bring audited accounts. Just fund Ikenna as an individual. Let them access individual credit until they can get to the point where it makes more sense to formalize. The second thing is demand engineering. Demand engineering meaning that thing I talked about, scale. So once businesses get to scale, it is inevitable they will formalize. So demand engineering meaning, let us channel demand to our local Southeast businesses. That is across all the 5 states. So governments, businesses, states have centers of excellence. Let us all buy our rice, or as much of it as we can, from Ebonyi State. Let us all build our technology for as much as we can from Enugu tech hubs. So if we, as governments, which is the biggest spender in the country, if we are deliberate about channeling procurement and expenditure to our local businesses, then they will grow faster. And when they grow, they will formalize. And we kill this obsession with foreign goods. So each state has its own comparative advantage. And let each government and each governor be focused on enabling each other so that all the procurement of certain goods and services go to where they have the best comparative advantage. And then third is, as we do that, then we start to pull them in clusters, cooperatives, and then teach them formalization as they grow. I think starting from the problem, starting with the symptom rather than the root cause is what we have been doing for years, which is everybody, you must be formal. And they say, no, I can't do it because first, I don't have enough skill to do it. Second, the demands and responsibilities required for me to be formal are too high. I can't afford it. So now what we should do is stop this obsession with formalization and support our businesses to scale. Thank you very much.
Okay, round of applause for Engineer Ozoma again. So just one of the key highlights from the conversation is, formalization and, being in the same field. I think that's one of the things that we face. Coincidentally, we're about to start a 2 billion naira nano funding program just for nano enterprises. So within market clusters. And this is also a problem because 97% of them are not registered. So how do we get them registered for them to qualify for these loan programs? So, we're looking at different models. Sorry. Apologies. Thank you for that. So I was just giving context into what he talked about, especially around formalization being one of the key constraints for small businesses to scale. One of the programs we're doing here in Enugu that will soon commence is a 2 billion single-digit lending program for nano enterprises within market clusters. We've been able to gather serious data from these businesses across 66,000, across all 17 local governments. And unfortunately, 95% of them are not registered. So we'll have to come up with a tiered lending scheme, which allows for informal businesses to get access to credit. We're also trying to explore areas around collateral-free lending programs and also create something called an alternative credit system. So we want to create credit history for these individuals. So back to our speaker, he has talked about a number of key points. I don't know if anyone from the audience has any question, any contributions. Okay, fantastic. We have a lot. Does anyone have any questions from here? So we can just move in tandem, just like the last session. Is there any questions from the first row? From the first section? No. Okay, so can we start with a young man here? Is there an extra mic?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ibrahim Miracle.
Hello.
I would like to make contributions to few things the presenter said. Particularly, I will agree with him partially when respecting the issue of formalization of businesses. Now, if you look at the need for that formalization, you will agree with me that formalization is important. But on the other hand, scaling at some point is also important. Now, for businesses to access funding, that's facilities, including SCDC, assuming that all happens, you will need to be formal before you can access funding at any local stage. Now, if you look at corporate law, you have businesses in categories. Before you talk about companies limited by shares. You are dealing with organizations, business organizations that have scale, which aligns with what he was mentioning. Yes, I'm with you. So you look at also businesses which are operating in low scale, which he may be referring that wouldn't need that formalization. But I would say they still need, with respect to funding, they will need that. But however, they may go for business name instead of aspiring to become a company limited by share, which has all those hurdles of annual reporting and also complication in registration. However, business name allows, it takes off those hurdles whereby you don't need to make annual reporting, and it aligns with this policy of ease of doing business. You can easily register by yourself, not needing a lawyer or any other professional to register your business. You can register your business even as a keke, a driver, or any petty trader. You would not require all the hard documentation and all that. So, but for the point I'm making is that in order to access funding, you will need to formalize your businesses. And funding is one of the critical things every business owner is looking up to with respect to this commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that contribution. I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Okay, can we get the mic to Mr. Ozoma? I think okay, we'll just take a few. So coming over here, let's start with, okay, since you spoke in the last one, let's start with the guy right behind you with the cap. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon once more, everyone. My name is Iken Okechukwu, and I run a business community in Owerri. So in the last 5 years, something I found that very important, which I suggest SEDC should incorporate in business development. Beyond funding, which are things that are outside, the sphere of influence of the entrepreneur, right? Maybe access to credit and all those things. I found something critical that makes businesses fail. Is the fact that people get into business for just the sole reason of making money. All the businesses analyzed in the top 10 that have dominated market caps, if you check those guys, they started businesses because these are things they love to do. From Facebook, Zuckerberg to Bill Gates. But what do we do in this part of the world? Someone gets to 30 years and you realize you are broke, you're poor. So you check around what's trending. They say Bitcoin is trending. What's trending? Software development is trending. And then you want to go and do that and start making money. No matter how much you're making in software development, I can't put my eyes on a system for 2 hours. So I'll definitely fail in that business. But it's making money. Your friends are making money. So what's the solution? Get people to do businesses that are within their sphere of strength. And this is a framework that should start from maybe secondary school and university. Can we get people to begin to assess them in terms of what are your strengths? Then train around your strengths. See, when people are around their strengths, they don't fail. Access to finance will not stop them. Failure will not stop them. So I don't know how we do that, but somehow we should have a program that try to assess people around their talents, strengths. Then when funding comes in, if little funding, the person will succeed. And the person never gives up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that contribution. So I just want to take one or two more from this row before we move over there. So the young man right behind you, then we'll move to this row. To this section, sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Chibuikem. So when he was speaking, when Isma was speaking, I was impressed with the fact that he said not all businesses need to formalize to access funding. Because truth be told, one of the major problems we have with small businesses in Nigeria is access to funding. If we can look towards, this is a suggestion, if we can look towards the individual as a person, his track record, his credit record, his credit history as a person, it can become the sole point which we can use to fund. When we fund him, he funds his business. So this is my own suggestion when we're looking towards small businesses. Let's fund the individual. The individual funds the business and pays back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So let's go to this section. We'll still come back here. Our senior figure with the red hat. Yes, right there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emeke Nemchukwu, and I've worked over 23 years with SMEs when I was in the banking sector. So what the speaker, I want to disagree partially with what the speaker said about formalization. That's number one. And two, there's an assumption he made that when they get to scale, they will formalize. My experience shows otherwise. I've worked with SMEs in Idumota, Oyimbo, Ross Street for 23 years. And the thing I find funny is that they don't have structure and they don't want to expand. And they don't have the capacity to expand because they lack structure. And they don't know they need structure, but they want to expand. So there's a saying, a popular saying that says, you know how far a man can go from his preparations. And scalability is how you grow. You start that point of scalability from the start, that preparations. So my suggestion is that in as much as I agree with him that will meet them at that point of informality, there is a need for them to start formalization from the beginning to access sustainable funding. I'm an expert in SME finance. It's not about government grant, they take it as our national cake. If you're talking about access to funding from a sustainable formal sector, commercial bank, or any development institution, they must formalize. And there's a need for capacity building, because what I found out inside the market is that the same thing a young man does to make money, the same thing he will do at scale and lose the money. And he does not understand that what you did starting is not exactly what you need to do when you are scaling or expanding. So we need to, one, encourage our SMEs, existing ones, on the need to build capacity as a CEO, knowing their job description, not being, we want to expand, but you are the business. And if you're out in 1 week, the business is down. How can you expand? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll just add a bit of context to what you just said now. So the focus being on nano enterprises, the informal businesses, you know, one of the issues, especially from a government perspective, is they always think if you want to formalize them, you want to tax them, right? There's that apathy towards that. So I think one of the things we're talking about is how can we create a credit system for them at that tier 1 level as sort of like an incentive to come into the formalization space, right? So once you've gotten a first year of funding, to qualify for more, you can now introduce some of these things you've talked about. So once you're incentivizing them, they usually, you know, sort of align towards what you want. So the young man right there, yes. Can we give him the mic? Okay.
Thank you very much, the moderator.
So the young man I was talking about was behind, but we'll go with you first, sir.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go with you first.
Thank you very much.
Even though you're young at heart.
Yes, we are retired but not tired. My name is Engineer Vincent Oria. I was the former director of NARIT on the agency of the Federal Ministry of Science and Technology. And we have engaged in training a lot of entrepreneurs. And I think that just what we're talking now, sometimes and most often, particularly those trained by the government. You look at an entrepreneur or a small-scale businessman, where did he start from? Did he start from the training by the government, or did he just grow up because he saw his colleague making money, he wants to go into that business? If he doesn't have that passion, it becomes difficult for him to grow because he'll be looking at making money and immediately. But if he has passion, he'll be thinking of how to add value to what he has learned. Then there comes a situation like you said, the moderator, you've trained about 2,500 or 250, small-scale businesses. After training, what happens next? You must empower them. And when you empower them, that is not just enough. You must mentor them. And during that period of mentorship, that's when you tell them whether they should now get formalized how to secure funds. Because when I was in Napa, you see these small business people, their concern was how do they get it registered with the Standard Organization of Nigeria, or how will they get certification from NAFDAC? These are the issues. But during that period of mentorship, you'll be able to, guide them. For instance, you're talking of passion. The use of these days, even those in the universities, do not concentrate. Instead, they will go into Yahoo. Why don't you create a situation, even after school, where they will come and learn skills? And if after learning the skills, you should be able to mentor them and make sure they grow. If they tell them how to do football, which is passion for the youths, most of them, they look at football, how was the ladder put inside? And we train people on how to make this football. It's a technology that is not common in Nigeria and in Africa. So what I'm saying is that SEDC should be looking at a situation where they will train small businesses and mentor them, and then get those certifications for them, or through the SEDC, they will be able to grow and to add value to whatever they have learned.
Thank you very much for that contribution. And just to add some context there, a lot of what we're also trying to incorporate, and I believe SEDC can do with some support, is ensuring financial literacy is part of your conditions precedent to accessing this financing. So the original young man at the back, yes, he's standing up. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, this question, it's a comment and a question, but it's also for Mr. Uzoma. So you spoke, and one of the things you mentioned resonated a lot with me. You gave out a lot of loans for consumer purpose, and we found a lot of these people use these loans for business. But then let's tie the relationship in there. They are surviving. And so for them to survive, they set up a little business or enterprise so they can kind of like continue to generate money for themselves. And so I like when you say, let us meet them at their points of need, right? Because now they are their business. So their business is their person. Usually, so you talked about that photographer, carries his camera, goes to the community events, tries to take pictures so that, he can sell them and get some money. But he needs a new camera, or he needs, a case for the camera so that he can do that. So now I see the challenge being a thing of security. How do you, the loaner, secure your loan? Because now it's going to an individual versus a company where you have all these registrations and all these other things. So a suggestion. Let's start with the individual. The first ever type of security was personal knowledge. Oh, who do you know? Who can vouch for you? Who can do this for you? Look at townships and communities setting up this kind of moral bodies where, okay, no problem. If you're certified by this group of people in your community, then we'll give you a loan. That's your first. So reducing that barrier to formalization, right? Where it's not necessarily saying, oh, spend this amount and register this company, and then if you're making over this amount of money, then you say, you pay this amount, or you kind of remove that, because you're right, it's a big challenge. So how can we create a system where use the community for that vetting process, so that it's using the community to say, okay, you know this guy, you can vouch for him, you know this guy, you can vouch for him. And then like somebody else has now said, after they've done that and they are growing, to unlock the next level of loan, that is a higher amount, then they now have to start entering the more formal processes. So it was just a thing that came to mind, in saying a suggestion to, as you carry this, can we now come back to the beginning of security? Who can vouch for you within your community? And let's use those people as the collateral for the loan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, at the back, just right behind you, the man in orange.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just very quickly, even the Amokoye Benjamin of the National Root Crops, even beyond the small scale, even with those who have scaled and those who have the money, I traveled Ibariam, Omo, Anako. I saw thousands of hectares of Ekene Dilichuku farms lying waste, processing industry, everything lying waste. The issue is orientation our businessmen have with business. I did a study for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa on why businesses fail in Southeast Nigeria. You see, our businessmen, even as close as their spouses, do not know the worth of their assets and liabilities. Even when they have registered such a company and they are billionaires, it just rotates among family as directors and friends as directors. And when the children grow up, they're not interested in your business, and the business lies waste. If we can dissect such businesses and even bring in individuals that are not related to us that can manage such businesses, it will be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me go to that road before we come back. So why don't we give it to Dr. Oluedo to give us some pointers there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My name is Dr. Eric Oluedo, Executive Secretary, Pensions Board. Now, my own is a question. Nowadays in Southeast, we have something that is trending in financing options. And that is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding. Somebody lost his mother or father, or somebody is opening his house, or somebody is wedding, and he simply goes to WhatsApp and opens a WhatsApp, sends an account details, and sometimes you see hundreds of millions of naira getting into that account. Now, how does Southeast Economic Commission, develop a strategy, develop a framework that a young graduate who is liked by his people, but he graduated, he has no funds available, maybe it's an offer, but there could be a framework that can, if he opens that kind of crowdfunding, people will donate for him to start a business. How does Southeast, because he's trending in Southeast, and if we don't capture it now, we might miss it. That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so unfortunately, I can only take 2 more questions before we invite Engineer Uzoma back. So I think we'll go with a woman now. I guess you can go one more, then we'll come back here. Please, let's give the lady over here the microphone.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chidima. And, okay, sorry, my question. Okay. Or my contribution or question. So I want to ask her, I enjoyed your conversation, I enjoyed your presentation, and I enjoyed the topic. But in most of those things, sorry, my research interest is within the framework of the human person. Because in all those things, it's the human person that is the engineer and the driver and the sustainer of ideas or anything. So I want to ask, what is the place of the human person in your theory of demand engineering? Because there are times in this particular sphere that you talked about demand engineering, trying to look inward, And I can remember Buhari's policy of closing the borders and the result of it in skyrocketed prices of foodstuff and stuff like that. So what is the place of the human person? And to give context to this, I also want to ask, beyond funding, what of exploitation? Because there are sometimes some of these businessmen, when funded, when they get this money, they go about or they go ahead exploiting our people for something that is as small as 5 naira. Somebody will go and sell it to you as 100 naira. The original. I think we should also look at that, because it also comes back to my point of the human person. Let us see that as a cyclical kind of thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. So one more. Wow. So who do I go with? I'll go with him.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Chika Obeta. And I want to talk about, when we talk about human capital development, if we want to succeed, we must be realistic to ourselves. because we've attended many conferences where people
So
speak.
this is MSME conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we talk about MSM, is about empowering people financially so that people can be financially independent through businesses. And one of the beautiful things is that if you come to Enugu, I will tell you anywhere that Enugu is doing very well in the area of empowering people. And I commend what Chilo is doing. Beyond that, the Igbos are the first people that started empowering people through small businesses from our apprenticeship system. But you know one thing that happens, especially in Southeast, is that once it is domestic, we don't value it. Once it belongs to us, we don't value it. Unless an Oyibo or a white person projects it. I'm telling you that our apprenticeship system, if it were to be from UK or US, you will not be able to graduate from any university in Nigeria without studying it. But we have it here in Southeast. Now that what is trending is about formalization and institutionalization, I appreciate the young man that made presentation. Because what everybody is talking about is formalization, without even having anything on the ground. Let's start with practical. Let's formalize, institutionalize our apprenticeship system. Even if it has to start with one university in Southeast, with what Aris Chilonfia is doing in SME, you now get somebody into the department of apprenticeship, get into a particular business, then give the person that money. As the person is studying in the class, the person is practicalizing it and growing that capital and the business. Before the person graduates in 4 years, the person is graduating as a millionaire or a billionaire. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Just to satisfy my conscience, I'm going to, one more person, you spoke before. If you can just give it to him, then we'll go back to our speaker to give the closing remarks before I introduce the next moderator.
Thank you so much, SPA. And my thanks go to everyone that has spoken, the first and second speaker. Actually, why I've been raising my hand is I remembered what was spoken on Tuesday concerning IP collateral, intellectual property collateral. Meaning that what I'm talking about, informal sector financing, is a very innovative project. However, I want to give solutions how it can be secured. First of all, I had a mechanic sometime in River State. He didn't go to school, but cars parked there because that's what I call IQ, not intelligent quota, but what I call indigenous quotient. The Igbos, the Southeast, who have individual indigenous quotient, intelligence that they came from their womb. So how do we make that possible? One, let's get skills like I have an experience. So my name is Jinabas Olude. I am the MD of Catching Business Resources. So how do you make them become productive, be making money from indigenous skills, and then they will now qualify to be funded? Because that's a solution.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we are going to pass the mic back to Engineer Uzoma just to give his closing remarks. Then we'll introduce the next panel. Thank you very much. You can probably from there.
All right, thank you very much. This has been a very riveting session, and it appears we were only able to take 40% or so of the questions. So thank you for this level of participation. I tried to group the questions or comments so that we're efficient with answering them. There was this conversation around the tiers of formalization, which you mentioned, the young man over there, and then collateralization, succession planning, crowdfunding. There's a human person. So that theory, you're going to have to explain it to me later. But the theory of the human person. And then the formalizing and institutionalizing our apprenticeship. So on the question of tiers of formalization, this topic was exploring formalizing Southeastern businesses, but looking at it in the context of a specific pain, which is enabling them get funding. Because a lot of Southeastern businesses cite funding as the biggest challenge. Not the idea, not the ingenuity of the entrepreneur. They don't even see access to markets as the biggest challenge. It may or may not be true, but the biggest pain point that has been highlighted is funding. So you can get a business name, you can get all the way to CSE registration, but to access formal finance, that is, go to a bank or microfinance institution, they will most likely demand a CSE, like a full CSE registration, not a business name. So you have the option of going all the way to fully formal or going as an individual if it comes to accessing finance. So the more practical thing in my view, and I think some of the speakers sort of corroborated that, you two sort of did, is meet them where they are. If then take away that barrier of funding. The second thing is collateralization, and I was linking that to formalizing and institutionalizing our apprenticeships, which you sir mentioned. So the challenge with collateralizing, as even big companies that borrow money, they have to collateralize with assets now. Get a house, get a factory, and whatnot. The individual borrowing money, the collateralization is themselves and the trust system that they come with. Now, in an ideal world, when I say ideal world, where we are going in terms of consumer credit is that you now have a credit system where you have credit scores and every borrowing you do is written against that, just like most other the countries we aspire to. So, like, I became an adult in America, me personally, and spent a lot of my adult life there. And from the first car I bought to my cell phone to the house I rent, everybody will check my credit. And if my credit is bad, they won't give me the house. I won't be able to rent a house. I won't be able to buy a car. I won't be able to get a cell phone, even paying for school. So your life essentially becomes tied to your credit history. And there's some work being done around that, including changing the laws that you see over the next 2 or so years, which is part of our work. But even as they are now, because we don't have that yet, the individual and their trust network is what you can rely on, as well as their history of transactions in a particular financial institution, which is why banks or microfinance banks only lend to people that bank with them. They can't check your credit history or from everywhere else. But formalizing the cooperatives, formalizing the trust networks, formalizing the apprenticeship system, I think is a more immediate and more impactful form of formalization that we can do today to enable the 99% of our businesses that operate as people. So with the work that Arinze and his teams have been doing, and some of the state governments, is let us go back to those trust networks. Let us understand how those cooperatives function. And with a bit of technology, which we have more access to, we can even have our cooperatives operate using basic technological tools, where you can vouch for somebody, you can recommend somebody, you can guarantee their loan, but they're borrowing as themselves. So 10 of us will come together, and if I borrow, everybody will guarantee my loan if I don't pay back. And if I don't pay back, they can kick me out of the group. So there are systems that can be built now, which have existed for several decades or centuries, that we bring back first, so that we can have a way to quickly show the trust of the individual and then give them credit to scale their current enterprise. Then there is talk about crowdfunding, even though the crowdfunding was about weddings and funerals. But I think that there is crowdfunding for business as well. And that is if you have an idea that is bankable, we're not reinventing anything here, actually. People go to friends and family to say, here's what I want to do, give me money. Or you'll be a boy if you want to do the more apprenticeship style, and then after a few years, they will let you go. So crowdfunding is also another alternative way we didn't talk about. I think the last thing was IP collateralization. Intellectual property is a bit tricky here, because our intellectual property laws are still not that tight. But I have a bit of a radical view on intellectual property, which is that the most important thing in an idea is execution. So until you have executed something enough to discover that it is valuable, I'm not even worried about going to register or fight for IP. So at the same time, we ties everything together, that the problem that a lot of us have, our businesses have in the Southeast, is enabling them to scale. The IP, giving them market to test that it works. the ideas, giving them market tests that it works. The traders giving them credit as they are now to grow the business. And then we see those that are good and those that are viable. Then we can force formalization on them. I think if we do that, working with all the states, being deliberate about this thing, we will see many more businesses transform in the Southeast, and we start to have centers of excellence and businesses that we are proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Uzoma Wagba. And with that, we come to the end of this session.